Today we're going to be ranking NFL draft reaches based on which ones made the least amount of sense. Some of these reaches were absolutely insane, while others were not terrible selections. So we have 4 categories ranging from low-key a solid pick to outrageous, and we have 21 prospects that were famously picked higher than expected in the draft dating back to 2014. Before we get into it, make sure to comment and let me know where you would rank these reaches in this tier list. So starting off, we have Jackson Dart from this year's draft. With this pick, I think the Giants, and especially Brian Daboll, were just really desperate for a young quarterback. On most boards across the league, Dart was rated as a day 2 prospect, likely to go somewhere in the second round. The Giants decided to trade up to pick number 22, giving up 3 day 2 picks to get Dart. He's a tough guy with solid mobility, but his lack of size, arm talent, and pocket presence make it tough to envision him becoming a plus starter. This was far from an insane pick, but one I still think was a reach. Next up, Tyler Booker, who went 12th overall this year. I think this is a perfect example of a low-key solid pick. Not many people expected Booker to go as high as he did, but he's still a great prospect who's likely going to be a good player in the league. He's got a unique combination of size, power, and consistency. I think in a few years, people will forget that this selection was considered a reach. So now going to 2023, beginning with Emanuel Forbes. This was still that old Washington regime with Ron Rivera. This pick was absolutely outrageous. Forbes was the skinniest defensive prospect in modern NFL history, weighing in at 166 pounds at the combine. He was expected to go in the end of the first round at best, but more likely the second round. The Commanders decided to get him at pick 16, and what makes this selection even worse is that Christian Gonzalez was still on the board, a consensus top prospect in the class who was also a cornerback. This was truly one of the worst picks in recent memory. Next up, Jack Campbell. This was low-key a solid pick. Campbell got a lot of love pre-draft. He had textbook size, toughness, and instincts for a linebacker. He was the main guy on Iowa's defense. However, he just lacked eye-popping strength and speed and wasn't the best in covering receivers down the field. Those deficiencies dropped his projected value, but he was still a very solid player and a dependable guy in the middle of the field. Picking him at number 18 was considered a reach, but I think adding a quality player at any point in the draft is a good idea, especially in a year like 2023 when the overall draft class didn't have that much high-level talent. Moving on to 2022, Jahan Dodson, another reach by the old Commanders front office. This was just a bad pick. Dodson had great production at Penn State, and he was a solid route runner with decent athleticism and great hands. However, Dodson was only 5'10", 178, and didn't have blazing speed. He also struggled with physicality and wasn't really a natural separator. Because of those factors, it was difficult to imagine him having a lot of success in the pros. The Commanders still decided to pick him at number 16, which was a really questionable decision. Next up, Kenny Pickett, another situation with a desperate team reaching for a position of need. The 2022 draft class was really poor in terms of quarterback talent. Nonetheless, Pickett was considered the most pro-ready, so the Steelers decided to get him at pick 20. His combination of solid size, athleticism, and accuracy appealed to many scouts. However, he greatly lacked arm strength and really didn't have any notable plus traits. He was basically Teddy Bridgewater 2.0. The Steelers needed a quarterback though, so they decided to go for him. Cole Strange, this one was a bad pick. Strange was fully expected to go on day 2 and possibly even last to the 3rd round. He was a small school offensive lineman with impressive toughness, elite athleticism, and solid technique, but he lacked size and power and also didn't have much experience versus top competition. This kind of profile doesn't usually go in the first round, but the Pats still picked him up at number 28. Considering that this was a pretty weak class and there wasn't a lot of great talent left, I'm not going to say this pick was outrageous. On to 2021, beginning with Alex Leatherwood. This one obviously was outrageous, the last first-round pick of the Mayock-Gruden era, an era defined by just insanely shocking picks that were completely off the consensus board. Leatherwood was an athletic specimen from Alabama who had ups and downs in college. He was far from a refined prospect and seemed like a guy that would need at least a couple of positive development years in order to become a reliable starter at tackle. He was projected by many as a second-round guy at best, but the Raiders decided to scoop him up at pick 17, ahead of guys like Jalen Phillips and tackle Christian Darrisaw. Just an unexplainable selection. Next up, Eric Stokes, another guy that was expected to go in the second round in 2021, but snuck into the first. This was just a bad pick. Stokes had good size and 4.2 speed. However, he was tight-hipped and not the best lateral athlete, which are pretty important traits at the corner position. He struggled to match with quick breaks and was overall an inconsistent performer. On to 2020, beginning with Austin Jackson. The Dolphins scooped him up at pick 18. He was expected to go late first at best, possibly even in the second round. This was a scenario where all the top tackle prospects were already off the board, and the Dolphins were desperate for one, so they went with Jackson. It was a slight reach, but nothing too notable. Next up, another Gruden and Mayock pick, Damon Arnette, and another absolutely outrageous one. Arnette was expected to go earliest round 2. He was a short-armed corner who was a stiff athlete. He was a great competitor, but definitely didn't have a first-round cornerback profile, so getting him at pick 19 was just bonkers. The Raiders skipped out on guys like Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, and Jordan Love. This pick really just made no sense. Jordan Brooks didn't even make Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 prospects. and he was also projected to go in round 2 or 3, but the Seahawks picked him at pick 28. They knew what they were getting with him, a textbook old school physical linebacker, a tackling machine, however a guy who had a 2-down skill set he really struggled to cover in college. Picking a 2-down linebacker with a top 30 pick in the modern NFL is just not good business. Clyde EdwardsHelaire, I'm tempted to put this one in outrageous, but we'll go with just a bad pick. EdwardsHelaire had the craziest PR during the pre-draft process, and a lot of it was because of his association with the Joe Burrow LSU team. Even with him being 5'9", running a 4'6", and not being the best tackle breaker, he was still considered a top 50 prospect. I feel like if he went to any other school, he would have been probably a day 3 guy. This one was borderline outrageous, but teams did like Helaire, so I don't think he's on the same level as the guys in the top category who were just picked out of nowhere. Next up, Clelin Ferrell, insanely outrageous, maybe the craziest pick of all time. Ferrell was a borderline top 30 prospect. Some teams didn't even view him as a first rounder, and the Raiders picked him at number 4. That's premium draft capital. There was nothing special in his game, in his physique, in his college production. He was just a solid overall player, but very far from a top prospect. This one easily tops the list. Next, Danny Dimes. This one's tough. I'm going to put him between desperate and outrageous. The Giants needed a quarterback, and Jones was the best one left on the board, even though he was expected to go late first at best. Getting him at number 6 was very rich. Jones really didn't have that good of a skill set, but I can't compare him to the guys in the top category. This was just another average quarterback getting overdrafted. Jonathan Abram, a 4-peat for Gruden and Mayock. This was just a bad pick. Abram was a super physical safety prospect who went headfirst every snap. He brought high character and toughness, which was coveted by this Raiders front office. However, he greatly lacked cover skills and wasn't great at matching routes in the open field, which made him a one-trick pony. Picking a safety who can't cover in the first round is quite the choice. To 2018, Terrell Edmonds. This one was outrageous. Edmonds was expected to go in the 3rd round, and he was a safety, so a non-premium position. No clue why the Steelers decided to pick him at pick 28. He had a unique size and athleticism profile, similar to his brother Tremaine Edmonds. However, Terrell was a poor tackler in college and lacked the physical play strength to be a functional safety and run support. He also wasn't great in coverage, lacked instincts and ball skills. This one might be the second most outrageous on the list, and it gets crazier when you consider that guys like Lamar Jackson, Austin Corbett, Nick Chubb, and Shaq Leonard went soon after this pick. We got a few from 2016 here, beginning with Kean ONeal. This was low-key a solid pick. Neal was expected to go somewhere in the 2nd round, but the Falcons picked him at number 17. He was an extremely physical and tough safety, similar to Abram, but Neal was more explosive of an athlete and had a stronger frame. He could thump guys in the open field and was a reliable tackler. He wasn't the best mover, but had okay instincts and was solid in man coverage against tight ends. He played through injuries in his final season, which affected his play and lowered his draft stock, but there was a lot to like in his game, and he fit in very well in the Cam Chancellor role in Dan Quinn's defense, so I think this was a fine pick. Artie Burns in 2016, the Bengals picked the corner the Steelers wanted, 1 pick in front of them, so Pittsburgh went with Burns at 25 because they were desperate for a cornerback. However, I think this one goes in just a bad pick. The Steelers were desperate, but they probably could have got Burns in the 2nd round. He also wasn't the best prospect and was a massive liability against the run, so this pick was very questionable. 2nd round kicker Roberto Aguayo. A kicker going that high is obviously outrageous. Aguayo was extremely accurate in college, but he had barely any attempts over 50, and his field goal percentage decreased each year at FSU. Considering that information, this pick just made no sense. Lastly, we have Juwan James from 2014. Miami was desperate for offensive line help, and with the top tackles off the board, all they had left really was day 2 options. James was a really solid pass protector in college, and considering that this class wasn't that deep in terms of top level talent, I wouldn't say the pick was outrageous. Miami was just desperate for offensive line help, and James turned out to be pretty solid for them. So that's my tier list for NFL draft reaches. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you like the content. Thanks for watching, and I'm out.